On Tech News Today, Apple is super optimistic about how many iPhone 6 smartphones it can sell, and Apple also patents yet another detailed smartwatch concept. Plus, Amazon gets into the mobile wallet racket, Yahoo gets more mobile, and Firefox and Chrome get more private. Stick around. Tech News Today is next.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Tuesday, July 22nd, 2014. This episode is brought to you by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell your used gadgets. Find out what your used Apple and Android devices are worth at Gazelle.com. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. I'm Mike Elgan. With me, as always, is Jason Howell, the one and only.
How's it going, sir?
It's going great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. My eyes feel healthy.
Good.
I just want to stick my finger in my eyeball and put a contact lens in there, but I know I shouldn't.
It sounds exciting. You should try it one of these days, maybe over the weekend.
A big day.
Something like that. And also, it's Tuesday, so we have Joe Panettieri, our Tuesday co-anchor. Welcome, Joe Panettieri and R2D2.
Thank you very much, Mike. And, you know, I'm laughing a little bit here. I wonder if all of our viewers have a frame of reference for why Jason wants to put his finger in his eye.
Yeah, I suppose I should clarify. I was out with my eyeballs. I had an eye infection, and it's all good now, thankfully, because you don't want that.
Fantastic.
It's no good not seeing things.
Yeah. Vision is good. The miracle of vision. We support it.
It turns out.
Today. Well, it turns out that TNT, this show, is very popular on Stitcher. Jeffrey Needles discovered yesterday that we're sort of on fire there. We've risen 13 places since last week on Stitcher. We're now the number 57 show across all categories, which is great. But more importantly, we are the 26th most shared show on the entire Stitcher network, which is great, but we want to crank it up. And in fact, we're the fastest growing show in the top 100, with the exception of the Paranormal podcast. But of course they have, they're paranormal, so they have advantages that we don't have.
They have the other world on their side.
That's right. That's right. They have a lot of ghosts helping them and so on. But anyway, so if you use Stitcher, thank you so much for your support and for sharing us. And if you don't use Stitcher, it's a great place to listen to the show. And so we recommend it highly. Well, Joe, why don't we jump into the news here? The Wall Street Journal reported that Apple is planning a massive initial run for the iPhone 6, as many as 80 million phones to be manufactured this year. Apple reports their earnings today at 2 p.m. Pacific, and we'll see if the investment community shares their optimism. Now, just to put that into context, what does that mean, 80 million units? And the Wall Street Journal is reporting that they're looking to manufacture between 70 and 80, and if you compare that with last year's run, they did between 50 and 60 million versions of total of the iPhone 5S and 5C. So this is wildly higher. This is I'm not going to do percentages here, but this is a lot bigger than last year. So they are looking at a big run this year. And of course, I think the elephant in the living room is China Mobile. They now have a fully fledged deal with China Mobile, the world's largest carrier. And I think Apple is rolling the dice on this because I don't really think they know for sure that the Chinese market is going to snap up iPhone 6s. What do you think of this news, Joe?
Well, it is interesting, particularly with the China angle. We've done so much reporting in recent weeks about China having falling outs with various U.S. IT companies, whether it's IBM or Cisco, more on the corporate IT side. But it looks like on the consumer side, Apple's feeling really confident that all these privacy issues with the China government, et cetera, are not going to get in the way of what you mentioned, this tidal wave of sales in China. And then, I would also add, don't underestimate the U.S. market. I'm sort of the poster child for iPhone 6 in that I'm on an iPhone 4. I've been waiting for the bigger screen, holding out. And, if this is a good device, I'm going to it the moment it's out the door. So I'm pretty excited about it.
So you're the person in that video that Samsung rolled out where they show the iPhone user saying, oh, we've been waiting for years for the big screen iPhone. And the Samsung guy's got this gigantic screen device going, well, that's nice. You must be very excited.
Yeah, so I'm that guy with a little bit more hair.
Exactly. So one of the interesting nuggets from this news, actually, was the difficulty in manufacturing the iPhone 6. Apparently, Apple is struggling with a couple of technologies and integrating them together on a larger screen device. Of course, they're looking at Sapphire, but there's also a new kind of technology that enables Apple to have a very, very thin screen. And again, Apple is always pushing the envelope in terms of overall phone thickness, and it always makes it more difficult to manufacture. So they have this thing called in-cell technology, and that is very, very difficult to do at scale at 5.5 inches apparently, and this is one of the reasons why they are delaying the larger 5.5-inch iPhone, according to this story, which they're looking at September and so on. So kind of an interesting nugget. And again, everybody's going to be talking about Apple today because of their earnings report.
Yep.
Analysts are expecting some pretty major news. They're expecting Apple to report sales of about 35.9 to 36 million iPhone units for the 3 months ending June 30th. And that would be up about 15% from last year. So they're doing pretty well. But again, earnings and the report card at the end of the day is based on how they do compared with expectations, not so much how they do in the actual market.
Yeah, it's really about setting that expectation and beating it. And, you know, Apple has not been a quote unquote growth company now for quite some time. They've got this huge installed base. And, you know, you brought up the manufacturing issue with iPhone 6. I think that's one of the big wild cards here, in that people take it for granted that Apple's going to get manufacturing correct and they're going to get their supply chain correct because they're so darn good at it. It's sort of like that gymnast who always sticks the landing, and you just take it for granted. And then the one time they're off, you're absolutely shocked. So I'm very curious to see how the manufacturing strategy goes with iPhone 6. And then towards today's earnings, you know, we'll see. I don't expect any big surprises, but because I think people are holding off for 6. That would be my guess.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, the analysts are also expecting lower iPad sales than this time last year, higher iPhone sales. But the important thing is the iPhone. 57% of Apple sales are from their iPhone. 57% of the company. That's pretty amazing, and it makes you kind of wonder where they would be if Apple had never gotten into the phone business. They would be a much, much smaller company and a much poorer company. So
yeah, and they'd be behind the 8 ball too, because they essentially cannibalized their iPod business with the iPhone. So they're very good at staying ahead of the curve, the way Intel used to cannibalize itself all the time. So yeah, I agree with you there. And you know, we'll see. The other thing I'll be curious about is once iPhone 6 ships, what percentage of those sales are to first-time smartphone buyers versus the upgraders such as myself. So we'll be looking for that stat closely. I don't know if Apple will ever disclose it. We'll see.
And they're going to definitely want first-time buyers, and they're obviously expecting lots of first-time buyers in China. Unfortunately, the copycat companies in China have already announced and will ship before Apple the copies of the iPhone 6 based on the rumors and leaks and so on, as we reported on the show before. Well, in just a sec, we're going to talk about another Apple innovation, if you want to call it that. But first, I want to tell you about Gazelle. We love gadgets. I love gadgets. You love gadgets. We all love gadgets. The problem is they cost money. And so where are you going to get that money? Well, some of that money can be purchased from the money you earned from the gadgets you bought in the past. Simply sell them to Gazelle. Gazelle wants to buy your used gadget. If you got an old iPhone or an old Android phone or an old tablet lying around, you want to sell it to Gazelle, you will be blown away by how much they'll pay you for your old device. You also will not be surprised by the fact that as devices get older, they reduce in value. So you want to sell your device to Gazelle as soon as you possibly can in all cases. If you know that if you're planning on upgrading to the new iPhone, you have the old iPhone, the best time to do it is just before the iPhone ships or just before it's announced. Every time there's a big push for those sorts of things, the price goes down because there becomes a glut in the market and so on. So you want to be active. Now, the thing to do, if just before, here's a good strategy for you to take with Gazelle, because they will lock in the price for 30 days. So a few days before they announce the iPhone, go in, lock in the price if you're going to be selling your old device, and then after the price declines, you'll still have that higher price locked in. It's fantastic. Here's how you do it. Just go to gazelle.com. That's Gazelle. Gazelle.com. Find the item you'd like to sell. Tell Gazelle the condition. Sometimes they'll even buy broken phones and tablets, so don't be shy about seeing if they'll buy it. And then you'll get the price. And again, that's locked in for 30 days. It's risk-free. Then you get paid fast by check, PayPal, or if you use the Amazon gift card option, you'll get an extra 5%. So go to Gazelle.com and get an offer right now and just find out what your old devices are worth. And again, you get paid in cash, payment is fast, and you get it within a few days of the item being received. So what's your Apple or Android device worth? Take a minute, go to Gazelle.com and find out. And again, do it now because your device may lose value the longer you wait. Well, it looks like Apple is innovating again, I think. Tell us about their latest patent, Joe.
Yeah, we'll see here. This is a nice follow-on story to iPhone 6. I think it's sort of like peanut butter and jelly. These two stories go hand in hand, and people may eat it up. Let's shift the conversation over to iWatch, or more precisely, Mike, Apple ITime, which involves a newly issued patent. Now, Mike Campbell is the editor over at the Apple Insider blog. Mikey, you with us?
Yes, I am.
Good to have you aboard today. Can you tell us a little bit about this patent? Has it actually been issued, and is it called iTime?
It is, one of the illustrations did have the iTime logo emblazoned on one of the mock-ups, if you will. The patent was granted on Tuesday. It was filed for in 2011, so Apple's been working on this idea for quite some time.
Okay, and what exactly is the idea?
Well, basically, it's describing a smartphone as, a smartwatch as the industry now calls it. What's interesting about this particular patent is that it incorporated the old 6th generation iPod Nano. If you remember, maybe a couple years ago, people were, slapping that on their wrist with these ad hoc straps. It kind of takes that idea to the next level.
Joe Panettieri, it's interesting. This whole concept of the iPod Nano as a wristwatch was launched into human consciousness by Steve Jobs in September 2010. It's been that long. And he mentioned, oh, yeah, you could wear this as a wristwatch when he announced the iPod Nano. And it wasn't too long after that when the Apple stores were actually selling wristwatches and what do you call them, watch bands for the iPod Nano. I got one. It was pretty cool, and everybody thought, okay, well, this is the future of the smartwatch. They're gonna develop the iPod Nano to become a wristwatch. And Mikey Campbell, I understand you're back with us now. This patent looks very iPod Nano-ish, doesn't it? And they, in fact, actually mention the iPod Nano somewhere in the patent application, don't they?
Actually, a bulk of the patent deals with an iPod Nano type solution. Tacked onto the end of it is what's actually quite interesting is they describe an illustration in which there is no removable media player attached. So it would be a de facto smartwatch. Actually, that's not the most interesting part. The most interesting part is the operation of the smartwatch itself, which can connect to an iPhone, an iPod, or any basically device that has wireless capabilities, and be able to transfer notifications from that device onto the wrist.
So one of the things I noticed is the not exact term, but the whole concept of a personal area network, this whole idea that the Apple ecosystem, it's almost like this personal cloud around you that you'll be jumping from device to device seamlessly. As you look at this, has Apple given any clues as to when they may actually deliver such a device? I mean, has Apple even confirmed that they're working on such a device publicly?
Definitely not. That may be one of the most asked questions of CEO Tim Cook right now. Everyone's trying to get probably a little bit of information out of him, but he's remaining very very tight-lipped on it. As far as the technology behind what they call a PicoNet, the wireless network, there's a basis in modern technology that they can roll something very much like the patent out maybe, next week if they so chose.
Interesting. I guess Tim Cook just didn't feel like it was ITime to announce this watch. That looked to me, the whole ITime thing looks like a placeholder more than anything else, and I really doubt that Apple would come out with something called the ITime. It puts way too much emphasis on the clock function and not the other features that would inevitably be in whatever smartwatch they come out with. It's also kind of interesting because the rumors were that Apple will come out with multiple form factors, at least 2, possibly 3, and so there's some speculation already that this type of thing could be one of those form factors. I personally have doubts. This seems to me to be kind of a throwback to the iPod concept, but who knows? I mean, the iPod actually could work really well on the wrist, and something like it could be networked and so on. So we'll keep an eye on that. Mikey Campbell writes for AppleInsider.com, and you can find him at Mikey Campbell 81. Thank you so much for joining us, Mikey Campbell.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, take care. Well, Sarah Perez of TechCrunch reports that Amazon has quietly rolled out an app and service called Amazon Wallet. The app is in beta, and it's designed to be used at retail stores at the register, not online, and it currently supports only gift and loyalty cards. Joe Panettieri, this is kind of an odd thing, but I guess in the context of the Amazon Fire Phone, it makes sense because the Amazon Fire Phone really is a showrooming device. It's something for you to take with you into other people's stores and from there buy things in a way that gives Amazon a few pennies on that purchase.
Yeah, a few pennies on that purchase. It's interesting. On the one hand, Amazon wants to disrupt traditional brick and mortar stores. But on the other hand, Amazon wouldn't mind taking a few pennies off every sale in that store. So they're basically playing the best of both worlds, hopefully. They'll take the entire purchase, and they'd love to have that entire purchase up in Amazon.com. Or heck, if you want to buy it in the store, give us a few cents on the dollar. And, that's pure profit margin, I would imagine, for Amazon. So wild times. And, it's funny. I've been watching the Fire reports. When we first covered it, there was a little bit of hype, obviously, and then it died down. It seems like there was backlash. And now it almost seems like it's coming full circle with some more believers coming around to Fire. So I wonder if this will be a killer combo.
Could be. I mean, either way, Apple wants to get a piece of everything it can. Now, there are already dozens of supported merchants, and I don't think there's any credible belief that Amazon doesn't intend to fully develop this into a real mobile wallet solution. Again, right now it's just loyalty cards and gift cards, that sort of thing. So we'll keep an eye on it. But kudos to Sarah Perez for this exclusive, and we'll be keeping an eye on what they do with that. And again, the Amazon Fire Phone ships Friday, and that is an AT&T exclusive. Well, speaking of mobile and companies wanting to be more mobile, what's going on with Yahoo, Joe?
Yeah, Yahoo's getting active. They earnings were a bit of a disappointment last week, but here's the follow-on. They are acquiring Flurry, which is an analytics specialist. Now, that move seeks to bolster Yahoo's mobile advertising business, and it comes, again, roughly 1 week after the disappointing Q2 earnings. Very interesting move here in that we hear so much about the pressure that Google and Facebook are under to make sure that their mobile advertising and mobile revenue strategies are correct. And quite frankly, those two companies appear to me to be miles ahead of where Yahoo is. So we'll see if Flurry can get Yahoo in the game here on a mobile ad on the mobile ad front.
It seemed to be the right kind of technology. I mean, this does some pretty deep analytics. They're very aggressive and pretty innovative about how they go about gathering that information using apps and so on. But the problem is that before Marissa Mayer took over at Yahoo, Yahoo was a company that just simply bought and closed other companies. They just bought one company after another. And she went in there, and everybody assumed, I think reasonably enough, that she wanted to kind of recreate Yahoo in Google's image. She spent her entire career at Google previously and was one of the very first people in that company, and she was also a very high-level and respected executive at Google. And then she went over to Yahoo, and she's continued to do the exact same thing, just keep buying companies and closing companies. The question is, does Yahoo have what it takes to integrate this kind of company into their own offerings deeply enough to where it makes a big dent in how they do things. So far, they've invented very little. They've announced very little that they've developed internally, and their integrations with companies they've purchased have been seriously underwhelming. I mean, they buy things and then you never hear from them again until a few years later, when everybody's forgotten about them, they close them.
Mike, the key word there is integration. And I think it was a carefully worded release today from Yahoo. They said, quote unquote, that the Flurry team is going to remain in their present locations. And then, quote unquote, where their vision, mission, and focus will stay the same. So it's almost like Yahoo is saying, hey, we're acquiring this great company that will help us with mobile advertising and empower our developers with mobile analytics, et cetera. And we promise not to screw it up by keeping hands off. But on the other hand, I've been through M&A myself. And at some point, the parent has got to digest the acquired technology and acquired people. And you can't just leave them off on an island. So somehow Yahoo has to find this balance where they let the acquired companies do what they do best, but also take that DNA and inject it into Yahoo and to energize the entire company.
And of course, Yahoo's recent earnings report showed weak growth in advertising sales. Facebook is also a one-digit percentage of the market. Google dominates completely the online, especially the mobile ad market. So this is really what Yahoo is trying to achieve here, and to compete with Google and to really be a player. But standing between them and the second place slot is Facebook, and Facebook is being very aggressive as well. So we'll see how that goes. Well, the Electronic Frontier Foundation released a free plugin for Firefox and Chrome. It's called Privacy Badger, and it can block trackers and widgets that record what you do online. Larry Magid is a technology journalist and internet safety activist and joins us now. Welcome, Larry Magid, from we're inaugurating your new office setup.
My new office studio. So you can actually see in the back there's a tool bag in my bookcase, because I'm doing things like screwing hooks on walls and getting things set up.
Just tell people you're a rocket surgeon. It's very impressive. So Larry, products like Disconnect, AdBlock Plus, and Ghostery exist. Why does the EFF feel the need to offer Privacy Badger?
Well, it didn't go into specifics, but they did say that none of these products are exactly what they want to see. They certainly paid homage to them and very respectful of these other products. But I think it's also getting it out there for free, getting out there with a nonprofit that's widely respected, that people trust. I mean, when I talked about this yesterday on a CBS segment, the anchor simply said, well, how do we know we can trust this? There are a lot of sleazy security apps out there. And of course, the answer is that EFF is a credible organization. So I think it just sort of adds to it. Also, the fact that it's free and well publicized and that it's simple. That's the other thing about it. You can configure it if you want to, but the defaults are very simple and pretty conservative in the sense that when you go to a site, if it has any kind of a adware/spyware on it, it won't block the site, it won't block the content, but it will block that element. And I have to confess that on larrysworld.com and safekids.com, two of my sites, I take Google ads. And I was very unhappy to find that when I went to my own site with Privacy Badger turned on, that needless to say, I got a couple of red flags there because of a Google ad. So I brought that up to the EFF guy, and he said, well, part of what we're trying to do is put pressure on web operators like you to come up with other ways to monetize. So now I have to start thinking about, do I really want to have a red badge, a negative red badge on my site, because I'm doing business with an extremely reputable company, but one that does collect information.
Right. So is this in beta, or is this an actual shipping solutions today? How mature is this code?
Well, I can't tell you exactly how sure it is. I can tell you that it hasn't crashed my machine. It seems to work okay. I installed it on Chrome, and it seems to function. Apparently, there are some glitches. When I talked again to the EFF, for example, I have a like button on one of my pages, and it probably should have blocked that, or at least substituted out its own, because like buttons, as you know, also send information up to Facebook. But they, in theory at least, are supposed to replace that like button with their own like button that only sends information if a person actually likes a page. But by default, according to the EFF guy, if the like button is simply there, then a visitor to the page, their information is being shared with Facebook.
Now, you mentioned that your site, because of the ad, the Google ads, throws up a flag in this plugin. What happens if somebody's using this? They go to your site. Is the advertising not registered? You don't get paid for whatever advertising. That's just doesn't happen.
That's right. I should be editorializing against this product, right? Yes, it will block that particular ad. Now, what the user can then not go in and do, and of course I did this on my own site, is you can change it from red to yellow to green. Red means bad, we're going to block it. Yellow means we're not sure, we're not going to block it, but we're going to warn you. And green means it's no problem. And you can opt to make it green, which of course I did on my own site. But it's up to the user. But it is an issue, and I think it's also important that consumers understand that it isn't necessarily evil that their information is being shared. They simply need to be aware of it and decide whether they're comfortable with it. Personally, I have come to grips that I am okay with Google getting information about me. That doesn't mean I love the idea, but it also means that I live in a realistic world, and I'm not going to block every site that has Google ads or even block all Google ads. But it's one of those things that I think people have a right to be aware of.
Hey, Larry, let me play devil's advocate, though.
Sure.
What company these days isn't trying to collect information about you out on the web? And is there a danger here that, like, every website's just going to show a bunch of red boxes with everything blocked going forward if this thing takes off?
I do think that's a danger, and I do think it requires a consciousness and an education effort on the part of all of us who talk publicly about privacy to get people to think about what they want and expect. I mean, I happen to believe, because like you guys, I make part of my living, actually most of my living, through free media, which is supported by advertising. So I don't have anything against advertising. I have something against surreptitious advertising. So when I listen to a Twitch show and I hear an ad, you know, it's pretty upfront that there's an ad. It's also pretty upfront that you guys are being paid for it, or the network's being paid for it. I don't have a problem with that. It's the surreptitious trading of information that I think people need to be aware of, and then decide whether they want it. And, you know, you guys have done it, right? You've gone out shopping for some kind of gadget, and for the next 2 weeks, every website you go to, or many of the sites you go to, have ads for that same type of gadget. Obviously, that's no coincidence. That's because of these third-party tracking cookies. Now, that doesn't bother me, but it's creepy, and you have a right to know it's there.
Now, Larry Magid, the chat room is loving what you're saying. 8-Bit Steve says you're spot on with everything you're saying. Web 3277 is asking you if it has any performance impact on Chrome.
Not that I have noticed, but I haven't metered it. I haven't done any kind of measurements, but if it does, it's certainly below my radar of measuring it on my system. And I've got a pretty fast cable modem, 50 megabits per second or so on average. So my guess is it's fairly marginal if it's there.
Well, it seems to me that the main purpose of this is to raise awareness, because it does a really great job of telling you how many flags it's throwing up on every given site. And I think the result is going to be that people go to websites and go, wow, what are you talking about? There are 9 things, and they can go in and say, oh, wow, that button is doing this, and that ad is doing that, and the site itself is doing something else. And that's a consciousness-raising exercise. And as they told you, Larry, it's also something that's raising a lot of awareness for people who have websites. And I think that's all good. And if that's the purpose, it seems to be both working, and it seems to be something that we should all get behind, because it's really good. That, you know, that's really the main thing, is that people know what's going on.
I've always thought of myself as a good citizen from a privacy perspective, but I have to admit I'm doing business with Google. I appreciate the revenue, but at the same time, I have to think about whether that's worth it, and it's causing me to have to rethink all that. That's
Larry,
a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Larry Magid is at larrysworld.com, and you can find him on Twitter and follow him on Twitter at Larry Magid. Thank you so much, Larry, for joining us on Tech News Today.
Thanks so much.
Well, Joe, it looks like the old phone booth isn't quite obsolete yet, at least in New York City.
Not quite. Well, we'll see how it all pans out. But, you know, it looks like New York City wants to transform its payphones into Wi-Fi hotspots. And we're talking about nearly 10,000 payphones across the New York City area. And you could consider this almost the dawning of a Wi-Fi supercloud, potentially. And you're looking at companies like Google, Cisco, Samsung, IBM, and others that are believed to be bidding on this potential contract. Now, on the one hand, this isn't hot news. The original strategy here was announced in May, but proposals for this strategy were due this week. And we're very curious to see if Google and or any of the other companies mentioned actually wins this deal to roll out what I would call municipal Wi-Fi or public Wi-Fi across New York City. And then potentially, will other cities view this as sort of the blueprint for what to do with all those payphones out there? Curious times. Mike, are you rooting for anyone in terms of who's bidding on this contract, or at least rooting for the strategy? Do you think there's some hope here?
I do think there's hope. I actually used Google's Wi-Fi at Starbucks. Of course, Google took over the AT&T contract and promised 10 times the speed that AT&T was providing. The performance of AT&T's Wi-Fi was pretty good. It was okay. So I got to try that for the first time at a Starbucks in Sacramento, and it was blistering fast. Absolutely love the performance, and it was really impressive. And as far as I can tell, Google is actually taking a loss, and subsidizing that internet connection. One of the fastest connections I've ever experienced in my life was in Istanbul, Turkey, in the Google office in Istanbul. So every place Google goes and provides Wi-Fi, whether it's to their employees or people at Starbucks or to people in these Google fiber cities, they really go big in terms of high performance Wi-Fi. And I can't help but think that if they get the contract for New York City and wire all these phone booths with Wi-Fi, it's going to be very fast. Now, my problem is that you've seen you live in New York, you've seen the New York City phone booths. They tend to be out by the curb. Right. So the location isn't ideal for, say, residents, as far as I can tell. But maybe it'd be okay. I don't see a Wi-Fi connection going beyond, the third or fourth floor. So you may end up with a situation in New York City where you have that, this digital divide between people who live closer to the street having this fast internet connectivity, and people who live up higher in buildings and skyscrapers having none, or at least not getting it free. So. That's an interesting element. But it is shocking for somebody who doesn't live in New York to go to New York City and see just how many phone booths they're everywhere in New York City, and think, wow, a phone booth. I haven't seen one of those in a long time, and most of them seem to be functional. So
Mike, what you're saying in that scenario is actually very interesting, right? The apartments or units closer to the street probably then end up costing more, right?
Exactly.
Because so it totally bypasses all of the free Wi-Fi. That's interesting. That's depressing, kind of.
There's some other variables here, too, to consider. I used to cover the municipal wireless industry for a website called Muni Wireless. And MuniWireless.com, it's owned by a third party, and they still do a great job covering stories like this. And some of the factors to keep in mind is when you roll these networks out, these municipal wireless Wi-Fi networks, the performance can vary greatly based on the season. And what I mean by that is once the trees start to bloom, and all the leaves are on the trees, and there's water in those leaves, it knocks down Wi-Fi performance potentially dramatically. So, Google's going to have to navigate, Google or the other bidders, whoever wins here, going to have to navigate issues such as that. And then also, the world has changed. We're not just talking about laptops and tablets, smartphones. There are so many of these devices now. Once you roll out free public Wi-Fi, I just wonder if the network can handle the load when people know it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also a kind of a problem for those who are trying to provide internet connectivity for a fee. So it's it's not exactly clear whether this boosts or harms the market for competitive marketing. How do you compete with free? You could see a lot of companies going out of business, or at least changing what they offer in terms of their services. So interesting project. We'll see if it works. I just have a tendency to think, yeah, man, just hook them up with Wi-Fi and see what happens. New York City is a great place to do that because there are so many people all crammed together in a small space. You could really serve a lot of people with free Wi-Fi. Well, Facebook unveiled a new feature called Save that lets you essentially bookmark links, pictures, and other web content. Unlike Evernote, Instapaper, and Pocket, Facebook doesn't let you access the content offline. It's more like Google Keep, which is accessible only if you're online and logged in. Lily Newman is a reporter for Slate, wrote about this story, and joins us now. Welcome to the show, Lily Newman.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So how does Facebook Save work exactly, and where can users find it?
Right, so it's in the drop-down menu on the side of posts on the right side. And for links, for places, for Facebook pages, for television shows, things like that, it'll show up and it says, save this link or save this article. And then in the left-hand bar on your normal news feed, you can go in and see everything you've saved and revisit whatever you wanted to save.
Now, what's the potential benefit here to Facebook users?
Right. So there's the benefit to users, and then there's the benefit to Facebook. For users, it's just bookmarking. You know, it's the same thing we've had in browsers in general forever. And so that got me thinking, you know, which can be useful. And that got me thinking, you know, why now? Bookmarking is a concept that's been around forever. And I think that since you can only save links and restaurant pages, things like that, that probably what Facebook's going for here is trying to just have one more way of figuring out what you're interested in, what was compelling to you, and then having a window into that so that they can do better targeted advertising.
One of the funny things about this feature, and one that I think is fairly unique, is that they intend to occasionally remind you of the things you've saved. So right there in your news feed, I guess,
right.
It'll say, hey, remember you saved this thing over here? You might want to go read it again or something like that. Kind of an odd thing to remind you of the things that you've saved. Do you think they're afraid people forget to use the service?
It seems like a nice aspect to me. There's tons of stuff in my bookmarks that I never looked at again, even though I wanted to. So in a way, that seems like a nice touch. I kind of might like that for my bookmarks in my browsers. On the other hand, I think it's also just a way to surface content again, give you more stuff in your newsfeed, and remind you, especially of things like TV, movies, you know, fan pages, things like that, offer those pages more promotion.
Now, this reminds me of a service that Google, somebody saw in a leak of some kind that Google was going to roll out a Google Plus feature that enabled you to catalog all of your physical possessions, all your books, all that kind of stuff. And it never came to light. Everybody said this was imminently shipping, and it actually turned out not to be the case. There are all these ways that companies are trying to get you to express interest in the things that you're interested in so that they can sell you advertising better. And you'd think already that Facebook would do a much better job, and Google Plus too, Google itself, whether it's on Google Search, YouTube, or whatever, of surfacing what you're really interested in. I mean, I would think that Facebook would know exactly what I'm interested in, yet their ads are so horrible. So hopefully this sort of thing will enable them to have more relevant ads. Now, right now, this isn't available to everyone, is it? And when can people expect to see this?
I believe it's rolling out over the next couple of days on iOS, Android, you know, both the big mobile apps, and for web. I see it showing up on my Facebook without any special access or anything. So I think people should start seeing it.
Layli Newman is at Slate.com. I'm a big fan of Slate.com, have been ever since it was a Microsoft joint in the early days. And she is also available on Twitter at Lily H. Newman. Thank you so much for joining us, Lily.
Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. Well, Joe, it looks like Verizon is getting revenue from an unexpected source. What's going on?
Yeah, you know, this sort of takes our coverage today full circle. Earlier, we were talking about the next generation smartphones, Apple, et cetera, wearables. But Verizon's growth, if you look at their latest quarterly results, a lot of it's coming from tablets. And according to their financial results, the company added 1.15 million contracted LTE tablet connections in Q2. Now, that's compared to about 304,000 new smartphone connections. So tablet connections roughly 3+ times faster than smartphones right now in terms of the growth. Pretty interesting, but I also have some concerns about it. Mike, any initial reactions from you in terms of what we're seeing on tablets getting connected?
Well, my initial reaction to this news is shock. Because, I mean, tablets are kind of a withering part of the market. Phones are on fire, and here they have all this growth in tablet connectivity. I just don't think they're going to be able to rely on this and compete with the others in the market if they're going to be relying on tablets. But still, it's an interesting category. You know, lots and lots of people get tablets and don't ever want to connect them to a connection that they have to pay for. They're happy to just use it with Wi-Fi around the house and the office. And so, yeah, I just think it's an odd thing, but it looks like they're being aggressive and going after a niche and succeeding with it to a certain extent. I just don't think they're going to be able to sustain it going forward.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you bring up historically how people have used tablets. So when the iPad first came out, I bought 2 of them, one for myself, one for the family. The one for myself had the cellular connection, and then the one for my family had just Wi-Fi. But the one for myself, I never turned on that cellular or LTE these days connection, and it just didn't interest me. And I've never I've never felt disconnected. I've always been around Wi-Fi. So we'll see. And the other key stat to watch here is the fact that, to your point, tablet sales are actually shrinking, not growing. And I'm referring to the overall market. Year-over-year tablet sales in Q1 2014 were actually down compared to Q1 2013. That's according to NDP, a research firm. Now, I don't have the exact stats, but the fact that here we are only a few years into the tablet revolution and it's essentially over in terms of market growth, that's really significant. So I don't think Verizon, I think this is sort of the blip on the radar for Verizon. It's an interesting stat, but they're certainly not betting the business on this.
Yeah, I think the interesting big picture is that first we learned that PC sales were down because of tablets. Then we learned that tablet sales are down because of phones. And phone sales are not down. So I think smartphones and phablets are really the rock star of our era. And PCs and tablets, they're always going to exist. People will sell them. People will buy them. But that's not where the big growth is. I think we're going to see continued massive growth in the smartphone industry, and that's really where the action is these days. So keep an eye on that. Well, that is the Tech News Today. Joe Panettieri, thank you so much for making every Tuesday such a delightful day for technology news.
Well, thanks for having me aboard, and always good to see you. And Jason, thanks for all of your help, as usual.
All right. Well, remember that Apple and Microsoft both report earnings today. That's going to be interesting. Apple's at 2 p.m. Pacific. Microsoft's at 2:30 p.m. Pacific. So check for that. There could be some really interesting news coming out of both of those earnings reports. And we want you to subscribe on Tech News Today. We mentioned Stitcher. Subscribe on Stitcher. You can also subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, Feedly, Yahoo, RSS. There's so many ways to subscribe. Choose your way at twit.tv/TNT. And please follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter name is Tech News Today TV. You can also join our Google Plus community and circle our page. Just search Google Plus for Tech News Today, and please send us your thoughts and opinions. Comment on Twitter or Google Plus using the hashtag Tech News Today, and we will find it. You can also send us email to tnt@twit.tv or leave us voicemail at 260-TNT-SHOW. And please don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight right here on the Twit Network. My name's Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.